Variables are an essential part of just about every programming language, but in today's video, we're going to take a look at JavaScript variables, how we can define them, and how we can use them the proper way. So what exactly is a variable? Well, variable is a keyword that we can define, and then we can set that equal to a value, and it will store that value inside that keyword. And then later we can use that value just by calling that keyword. So we would use this for things that would require us to duplicate a lot of code sometimes, or it's just used for setting values whenever we need to set values. So here I've just got a basic HTML file, and let's create our script. So we'll create our script tag, and we'll give this a source, and we will link this to script.js, and we will defer that. And let's create our file, script.js, and let's just make sure that our script is working, so we will alert hello. If we save, we get the hello popping over here on an alert. Perfect, so our script is linked and it is working properly. So in JavaScript, there are three separate keywords that we can use to create variables. The first one being var, and var is the older way of creating variables, and we'll get to that here in just a second. The newer way, though, is using let or const, and whichever one of these you use is very dependent on the way that you want to use the variable, and we'll take a look at that here in a few minutes. So let's start with var and see what it is and how we can create our very first variable. So let's go ahead and delete this alert because we no longer need it. And to create a variable, we need three separate pieces. The first piece being the keyword, that's var, let, or const. The second part is the name of the variable, and then we're going to set that equal to the third part, which is the value that we're going to store in that variable. So let's start off with var. Var is going to be our keyword, and it's going to tell JavaScript that we're creating a variable right now. And then after var, we're going to name the variable. So let's just create a number variable. So I'll just create a num variable. And then to set that equal to a value, we just want to set that equal to a number or whatever value. So let's just create a 52 variable. Now JavaScript knows that that num variable holds the value of 52. Now let's go ahead and use that variable. So let's go ahead and open up our console first, and we're going to be using our console for a good bit of this video. And let's go ahead and use the variable. So we'll log out to the console that num variable. So we're going to say console.log, and we'll pass in that num variable. Now, whenever you call a variable like this, it knows that that value is 52. So it's going to remember that value as 52. So whenever we log it out, it's going to replace that name num, that keyword num, with the value 52. So as soon as we save this, you can see that we have a console log of the number 52. And this is how all variables work. It remembers the value that you store inside of it, and it doesn't even matter what value it is, it just remembers the value that you stored inside, and then every time that you call that variable, it's going to replace that variable name with the value that you stored inside of it whenever you save and process the JavaScript. So what is up with var, and why do we have three separate keywords to do essentially the exact same thing? Well, as I said before, var is the old way of creating variables, and the key takeaway is that the way that var is implemented in JavaScript is not set up for modern day programming. So a lot of times if you have large programs and you're expecting things to work a certain way, var sometimes doesn't, and it could break your code and it could lead to very buggy code. So long story short, var is the old way of doing it, and I showed you here how it works because it's very possible that you could still run into it out in the wild somewhere, but it's not really meant to be used in modern or new programming. And that is why we have the two new keywords that are meant for modern day programming in let and const. So let's take a look at them and see what the difference is between them two. So let's go ahead and get rid of this here now. We no longer need it. And the let and const keywords are used in the exact same way. So we could say let string equal hello, and that string variable is going to contain the value, the string value, hello. And then we can also use const and say const num is equal to 89, and that num variable is going to contain the number value 89. And we can also console log these out, so we can say console.log string, and we can say console.log num. And if we save that, you can see we get the string hello printed out from that string variable, and we can also see that we got the 89 number printed out from that num variable. But if these things are exactly the same, why do we have three of them? Well, the difference lies in whenever you try to redefine the variable, whenever you try to overwrite an old value and define a new value on it. Let's take a look at that. So let's go ahead and remove those console logs here. Now, whenever we redefine a new variable, we actually don't need to use the let or const keywords again. All we have to do is set that variable equal to its new value. So if I wanted to change the value of that string variable, all we have to do is say string is now going to be equal to whatever your new value is. And let's say we just set it to by, just like that. So from here on down, after this, the string variable is now going to contain the string by unless we change it again. But the problem comes whenever we try to do the same for const. So we could try it. We could say num is now equal to the number 52, and if we save that, you're going to see an uncaught type error over in your console, and it says assignment to constant variable. And the problem here is that whenever you try to reassign a value to a constant variable, it is not allowed. It's going to throw an error, and that's because a constant variable is supposed to be constant. It never changes. But the let variables are supposed to change. Those are changeable variables, but the constant is not. So that's the main difference between let and const, is that we can redefine a let variable, but a const variable is not supposed to change. Now, I know you might be thinking, well, that just seems counterintuitive. Why wouldn't I want my variables to change? But I promise you, a lot of times, the majority of the times actually, whenever I'm programming, I generally use const because 9 times out of 10, you are not going to need your variables to change. So if I were to ask you, what is the value of the string variable? What would you say? Is it by? Is it hello? I mean, we defined hello here, but we never actually used it. What's the actual value of the string variable? And I would tell you the answer would be, it depends. It depends on where you use the variable, because up until this point where we redefine it, it is defined as hello. So if I were to, before we redefine it, say console.log the string variable, that's going to print out hello. And the reason for that is because JavaScript parses from top to bottom. So it's going to set the string hello first, and then it's going to log out the string variable that now still contains hello, and then after that logs out, it's then going to be redefined to by. So if we now console.log the string variable underneath of where we redefined it at, we're going to get the new value. So we can see hello is from this string variable call, and the by is from this string variable call. So it really depends on where you use it, and this is very flexible. You can use this in many different ways. This is why they changed it so that let does it this way and const does it the other way, where you cannot rechange the variables whatsoever. So what about the situation where you may not know the initial value of the variable? Maybe you have some code that's going to run and create the value of that variable, but you don't know the initial value of the variable to set it to. What do you do then? Well, in this case, we can use let and then just redefine it. So we could say let string, and we could do it like that, or we could say let string equal null, saying we don't know right now what the value of the variable is, but we will in the future. So if we console.log the string value now, we're going to console.log the null value, which is set by us because we don't know the value of that variable initially. Or if we just say let string, just like that, let's do let string 2, and then we console.log string 2, that's going to be set to undefined by the browser, and we can actually redefine both of those. So we can say string is now equal to hello, and string 2 is now equal to bye. And if we console.log that out down here, you can see that initially we set this first string to null, the browser set this to undefined, and we logged those both out, and then when we redefined those were then logged out to their prospective redefined values. So now that we know how to define and use variables, let's take a look at some of the naming rules and conventions, and we'll start off with some of the naming rules. So there are a few rules that we have to follow whenever we're creating a name for a variable in JavaScript. One of these rules is that we cannot use a reserved word as the name for the variable. So things like let and const, these are reserved words that tell JavaScript something, and we cannot use these as the name of a variable in JavaScript. And I'll leave a full list of all of the reserved words and a link down in the description below if you want to check them out. Now, another rule that we have to follow whenever we're creating a variable name in JavaScript is that we need to start the variable name with either a letter, an underscore, or a $sign, and generally I just choose a letter to start it out with unless I'm following some different convention. But we cannot create a variable name that starts with a number. We can definitely have numbers in our variable names, but we cannot start it with a number. So we can say let, and we can start it with a letter, an underscore, or a $sign. But we cannot start it with a number. It's going to throw an error on us. And another rule that we have to follow is that JavaScript variable names cannot contain spaces. So if we say string and then we put a space, it's expecting us to set it equal to something. We cannot say string number 2 just like that. That's going to throw an error. It's expecting us to set it equal to something. We cannot set spaces inside of variable names. Now, there are a few JavaScript conventions that we don't have to follow, but we probably should. The first one being that multiple word names use camel case, and I'll show you that here. So if we have a name that has multiple words in it, so let's say get string, this is what we call camel case, where the first word of the name starts with a lowercase letter, and every word after that starts with an uppercase letter. So if we had 3 words in here, get string now, I would start the first word get with a lowercase letter, the second word string with the uppercase letter, and then the third word and every word after that starts with an uppercase letter as well. This is what's considered camel case, and it's a convention that is used in JavaScript all over the place. Now, you also want to name your variable something meaningful, something that tells what the variable is or what the variable does. You don't want to work on a program that has a bunch of X and Y variables because you have no idea what those variables are or what they contain. So you want to name it something that is meaningful to what it's containing. So if I were getting a value from a server, say it's your bank account information or whatever, if I was getting your bank account balance from a server somewhere and I wanted to store that value in a variable, I would say bank account balance, just like that. I wouldn't say X, I wouldn't use a variable X to store your bank account balance. I would use the bank account balance variable name to know what it is that we are using and what it contains. And that is it for variables in JavaScript. Now, don't worry if you don't fully understand it right away. This is something you use all the time, all over the place, so you'll have plenty of time to practice and get better at it. So if you did like the video, make sure you slap a like on it. Check out the full playlist, link is right next to me. Make sure you subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.